Welcome in to another episode of the My Two Bits Gators Football Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Ben, joined as always by your other host, Mr. Randy. Randy, how we doing?
B, what's going on, my man? Good to be back on the air with you. Feels like it's been a long time, and I'm looking forward to hashing out this agenda with you.
Yeah, man. Yeah, well, it feels like it's been a long time because it has been a long time. Apologies for the delay. You and I both got caught up in some of this weather that's been going on this week and some of our travels.
Yep.
And to that end, thoughts out to everybody out there. We have listeners all over that tune into this. So thoughts to everybody that's going through some of this weather. You know, we got some pretty bad storms this week. So hope everybody fares as well as possible getting through these things. So just want to pass that along before we get started here. So to that end, we will get into the episode now. This episode number 80, which is hard to believe, but nonetheless, here we are. I know, it's wild. And we will be setting the bar for Mr. Sumrall today. So taking a look at what we want to see out of him and this program moving forward, obviously, and setting some at least some baseline expectations for the goals for the program moving forward into this year, next year, and beyond, hopefully. So with that, as always, we'll start off here with our intro, our mission, our accuracy disclaimer, our vision, and our agenda. Our mission, of course, is to provide factual analysis of all things Florida Gator football. Our vision is to, or excuse me, our accuracy disclaimer is to have our information will be accurate to the best of our possible ability. We will cite our sources whenever we use them, and all statistical data either comes from ESPN or stats.ncaa.org, and recruiting data comes from on3.com. Our vision now is to have unfiltered conversation around the product on the field, as well as recruiting and overall coaching decisions. And our analysis will be based on review of film. And while we will express opinion, that opinion should always be based in some form of fact. We will also evaluate strategy and tactics and discuss our observation of player personnel decisions and on the field execution. All right. So our agenda for this evening, pretty straightforward. We're going to take a look at the head coaching record so far for Mr. Sumrall and how it compares to the Gator Standard, right? And quotes on the Gator Standard there is how it we have evaluated that, right, over time. Look at some of the numbers behind what that actually is and what it means. Then we'll take a look at desired results for this year and the 2026 season, both the off season and the season itself. And then talk about desired results for 27 as well. And then looking into year 3 and beyond, hopefully, but that would obviously be indicated by the first 2 seasons' performance as to, you know, what we want to see there and if we will see it there moving forward. With that, we will wrap things up and talk about our next pod. So without further ado, let you kick things off there. Give us the breakdown of the Mr. Jon's record and how it compares with the Gator Standard there, Randy.
For sure, B. All right. Coach Jon Sumrall has posted a 43-12 overall record in 4 seasons as a head coach. Yes, for those of you who did not know, he has spent 4 total seasons at the helm of a national program, 2 at Troy and 2 at Tulane, reaching a conference title game in all 4 years of coaching. Interesting. In Tulane, he compiled a 19-8 record. At Troy, he compiled a 23-4 record, winning 2 Sun Belt Conference championships. So, notable there, 43-12 overall record. People always wonder, well, okay, this group of 5, G5, is it really? It's the same. It's Billy 2.0, right? Billy, as we might know, compiled a successful 40-12 record in 4 seasons there at the helm of the Ragin' Cajuns. So that was what it was. Okay, 4 consecutive Sun Belt West Division titles, 2 conference championships, 4 bowl appearances, yada, 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 partridge in a pear tree. Okay, so there's that. So very, very similar to Sumrall and Napier. You've got some commonalities there. Okay, overall, when you look at that from a standard standpoint, I'm going to take a step back and go to Coach Spurrier, a name that obviously reigns in Gator lore. 122, 27, and 1 for a winning percentage of 81.7%. 87-14 in SEC play. Never won fewer than 9 games in his tenure. The next up is going to be Coach Urban Meyer. he did a thing or two well here at Florida. Overall record of 65-15 for a percentage of 81.3%. 36-12 in SEC play. And something else outside of the SEC championships, outside of the national championships, that I think was even more or just as impressive, but nonetheless you don't see nowadays. The 08-09 team combined for a 22-game win streak. Unreal. So that is kind of a neat to think about as well. How that compares to Sumrall is the fact that currently he owns one of the highest winning percentage among active FBS coaches. Sumrall's current overall record is a total of 78.2%. So just a tick behind the two men, Spurrier and Meyer, that he now calls mentors, confidants, roommates, best friends, whatever you want to call it, because you know for a fact he is going to be leaning on them and bending their ears. So the other thing that as Ben and I mentioned before on a pod that we had regarding the Gator Standard and Gator history, you look at that win total, and we're looking at 9 winning games per year, right? That's just what it goes back to. Look at Spurrier, never won fewer than 9 games. So Sumrall has got some very interesting shoes to fill. Not necessarily from Napier, but going back, talking about the Meyer and the Spurrier tenures. Really interesting to see how he's approached coming on board at Florida so far. And the other thing that's going to be neat for me to see, I think for a lot of people, is the intensity, the different approach that he brings. I remember Napier's press conference and Sumrall's press conference, and there's really not a whole lot of comparison. Really not. So outside of that's what I've got as far as winning percentage, overall record, Gator Standard. What do you got, B?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit pretty much all the points. You mentioned the 9 games per year. So that's the average since 1990 that this program has won, at least approximately. It was 9.3 when we calculated it 2 years ago. Obviously, it's come down a little because we haven't won 9 games since then. So it will have influenced it a little bit negatively, but it's still going to be right around 9 games per year. And that's again, modern Gator football, if you want to call it that. So that's where we got that number from. We're not going to go all the way back to forever. But in the modern era, essentially, I mean, I know you could pick any kind of year for that potentially, but going to 1990, it's been 9 games per year since then. So that's where that number comes from, and where we're setting as the approximate, win total that is the standard, if you will.
Yep.
You mentioned, I didn't know if I heard you mention Summerall's actual winning percentage in there. You might have, but it's 78.2, so very close to Spurrier and Meyer. And apologies if you did actually say it, but so very, very close to in line. But again, as you did mention, Group 5, not the same as the SEC, right? Very, very different standards there, right? So we'll have to see how that translates. And obviously, you of course mentioned the similarity to Billy. You made a point there of talking about the press conference and how that differed, right, in the opening there, and some of the other things that have been said. Some of the other things that I think have already shown a difference are he's not hiring, a bunch of G5 coaches to come in. Yes, there are some. We talked about that, but there are also several that are not, right? So good to see that we're, especially at positions that really matter, like your coordinators, right, and things of that nature. We are not necessarily seeing those guys come in, and I think that's going to hopefully make a difference. The fact that he has coordinators at both spots, right, also is good to see. So we'll also look at the transfer portal activity already, right? Something that Billy did not really embrace, right? He did some with it for sure, not nothing, right? We got some quality guys out of the portal for sure, but it was not something where he was willing to really go deep into, right? It was more of just where he absolutely had to have it. He would go in and get it, right? Sumrall is clearly all in on using that to leverage, right, wherever he possibly can. And it'll be interesting to see how that continues to develop, and a point that we will look to, right, as we'll get into here in a second. So I think despite their similarities in record, despite that they were both G5 guys, despite that they both actually coached in the Sun Belt in the case of Troy and Louisiana, I don't think they're the same person, right? In fact, I know they're not, right? So it doesn't mean that Summerall's going to work out when Billy didn't. We don't know that, right? One of the things that we always talk about is we're not here with a crystal ball. We don't know what the future holds. We're just going to evaluate what we see and go from there. So to that end, let's talk about what we want to see and things that we will be evaluating as time goes on, some that we already have. And we're going to start off for the 2026 year with roster retention. Most of which has already taken place, which is cool because we can already evaluate it to a degree. So saw an interesting article before I got on here, and apologies for not sourcing it, but it was in regards to production loss, like snap count production loss versus the number of players that were actually lost. So Florida had a higher number of players hit the portal and leave at 34. It was not the highest, certainly, but it was up there. And yet they were not one of the highest teams in terms of snap count production loss as a percentage. We lost about 25% of our snap count production from last season to the portal. So when you look at that, guys that stand out, obviously Lagway, Hayden Hansen, actually, because he was on the field almost every play, because we can't not have a tight end out there. That's a must. So, and then you also, of course, had your starting safety in Castell leave, though he was injured a little bit. And those are really the three that influenced it the most. But when you look at it, aside from that, the rest of the guys that were out there, even though some of them were starters, they were hurt a lot, right? Like Trey, didn't see the field, saw the field more than the year before, but still didn't see the field a ton because he got hurt. Right? A lot of injuries. So when you look at this, we didn't really have either guys that were impactful starters in terms of production impactful, not saying Trey's not an impactful player, not what I'm saying, or we didn't have necessarily guys that were really going to see the field that much in the rotation, right? We talked about that when we looked at everybody that departed on that transfer portal breakdown episode, which we will finish going through those guys when we do our National Signing Day pod, by the way, the ones that we hadn't already broken down that have come. That aside, when we look at who we did keep, that's huge because we got what we're referring to as the big five back, right? Horsbaugh, VB3, Dallas Wilson, Miles Graham, and Jaden Woods. Those first four we knew for the last pod. Obviously, Jaden we were talking about wanting to retain, and then we did. So huge pickup in roster retention. Really guys that matter coming back, and I think that's not to be overlooked, certainly. In terms of that. So that's something that's obviously very important. I'll get your thoughts quickly on the roster retention piece before we move on to the next point. What do you got there?
Yeah, overall some good stuff. I like what you said there. And I think that's something that we don't see a lot of, right? And by way of that, I mean is transparency. Napier had this cloak and dagger type, always playing chess, and I'm not going to reveal, my rook 4 to my, and just kind of going about that way. And Sumrall just, here's what we're going to do. Here's how we're going to do it. I really appreciate, believe it or not, how he approached the portal. I know some people were scratching heads, a lot of people scratching heads as far as what we were getting, how we were getting, but the way in which he went about doing it, his directness, especially when he was still coaching Tulane, everything else that he did, especially, and I'm not going to get into this, but how he handled the Lagway situation and the fallout and just waited. And all of a sudden it's like, mic drop, good night, game over, drive home safely. Yeah. And I think it's been phenomenal. It's one of the best things he could do. To that end, I will say, you call it the Big Five. I know people at Michigan might hate me for this, but I'm going to call it the Fab Five, right?
Blasphemy.
I know. They're not freshmen, but at the end of the day, Jaden Baugh, VB3, Dallas Wilson, Miles Graham, Jaden Woods. I believe these pieces helped to stabilize a core of returning production that we desperately needed. Minus, of course, Wilson missed a lot of time with injury. VB3 missed a couple of games. But at the end of the day, we know exactly what each of these players are capable of. Miles Graham is a true sophomore. That was your signal caller. That was your quarterback on defense, folks. The plays went into his helmet. A true sophomore. So phenomenal there. We know Jaden Woods' motor. He has a built-in motor. You do not have to get that kid fired up. Okay? He comes already revved up. Jaden Baugh goes without saying. VB3, we've seen those splashes. What can we do if we get him into space more? And Dallas Wilson, despite the injuries, we saw him become an absolute problem when he got the football or when he was targeted. So phenomenal there. A couple things I have there. is On3 has our current transfer portal ranking at number 12. This is also what I think is very interesting. The 29 players out. So it was going to be 30, 31, but right now confirmed 29 players out. Their average player rating, B, get this, 66.72. I said, oh, okay. So, okay. I'm just curious. What do we have coming in? Of the 26 confirmed coming in, we've got an average of 70.11. The average player rating. So that's been upgraded. We know there's a need for a 5-star. That's fine. But guess what? We had, as far as 4 stars goes, 3 out or 1 out and 3 come in. Okay, so that was good. And then the rest we know are 3 stars. That's going to get mixed up in there. But I really appreciate the way he's handled the portal, how they've gone after, how they've been very direct. And again, just building relationships, doing their best to connect with kids and do it the right way. And I tell you what, he's off to a phenomenal start.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I totally agree. And I think, like you said, very much headed in the right direction early, and just love to see him embracing it as something that we needed to do, certainly with losing all of these guys. Interesting that there's a different count there. I think we did see, I can't quote this right now, I'm just trying to pull it up, but it's not loading the way I need it to right now. But I think we did see certain ones of the transferring out didn't necessarily hit, in terms of like maybe the kicker and the long snapper and stuff like that. I don't know that they all hit on threes, like they don't necessarily have them on there. I could be wrong on that. But I think maybe perhaps some walk-ons and stuff like that might not be in there either, just because they don't make their ranking. But I can't be sure on that. Article I read definitely said 34. Again, I'm sorry I can't quote it right now, but in terms of forcing it. But yeah, you're right. That is definitely what On3 says. So regardless, moving on. So for these next couple pieces, we put in some rankings for what we want to see, but we did not discuss these beforehand. So I'll get us started here and tell you where I've got it, and then you let me know where you're at, and we'll do a live reveal here. So
yes, sir.
Next piece that we want to talk about is a recruiting class position and transfer portal performance, right? So I set it up 2 different ways here. So this might have differed from you a little bit. I gave kind of a caveat to whether or not whether one was better than the other. So for this next year, because it's the bump class, right? So this will be for the end of 26, right? So I want to see either a top 5, I'm not messing around, top 5 recruiting class and a top 20 transfer portal class, or I want to see both inside the top 10. And the reason I gave that caveat is because I know sometimes, you don't always get everything you want recruiting wise, especially in this day and age with NIL. But because we're seeing John be willing to hit the portal as hard as he has, right? And we've seen this with teams like Ole Miss, for example, right? Ole Miss doesn't recruit that well, but they hit the portal well. So if you can do that, you can build a pretty solid team. We've seen that from what they've done over the past couple of seasons, right? So I will caveat out that if you don't get the best recruiting class, or the one that we would want to see in a really elite top tier, top 5 scenario, you give me a top 10 recruiting and top 10 portal class, I'll take that. That's going to give you some really high-end talent. So that's my standard for the combinations and the way I want to see it. So where are you at with that?
Very bold move, my friend. We'll see how it works out for you. So do me a favor, run that back, B. I heard a top 5 class and then top 20 transfer portal, or 2 top 10s.
You got it. That is exactly what I'm looking for. Either one combination or the other.
Very interesting. So I put it at I put it slightly differently. So as far as the overall class goes, I'd like to see a top 8, because it's been a while since we've been in viable single digits. Although I like where you're headed with 5. For me, I don't know if I could really say I want a top 5, but I don't know if I can do that in a very serious tone and, without being too overzealous. So I would say top 8, and then on the transfer portal side, I want no further than 12. So I've got 8 and 12, B. 8 and 12.
Okay. Yeah, no, I'm good with that, and that kind of aligns with the double top 10 for me, right? It equates out to the same thing. So yeah, I think that's good. And the fact that we're already at 12th, right? and in this first year, right, especially considering how many players we lost, right? And it's not uncommon guys, you're always going to lose guys, but like if you have good roster retention, which he's always already shown a capability and a passion for, right? If you continue to do that, which we'll talk about when we get to 27, but like if you continue to do that and then you also hit the portal hard, that's what can really move that ranking up, right? That's where you can really do that, because On Three at least looks at the combination of both. 247 doesn't do that. One of the reasons I really don't love their rankings, because they only look at who you have coming in, and I think that's totally disingenuous, because if you don't look at who's going out also, I don't think that's the right way to do that, or at least it doesn't appear that they do. I guess I shouldn't say that, but I only see on their rankings where they look at the quantity and the rating of those guys coming in. I don't see any evaluation of it going out. So I could be wrong, but from what I see on their metrics, I don't see that. Whereas On Three evaluates both ways on the class, which I think is a way better way to do that. So moving along. All right. Offensive and defensive rankings. So for 2026, I'll let you go first on this one, actually, since I just went first. What do you want to see for offensive and defensive rankings? This is total overall. So I guess it really means scoring when we talk about that, right? So it's going to be your scoring rankings. What do you want to see for offensive and defensive rankings in Division I for 2026 for the team?
Yeah, so this was tough for me. I went back and I vacillated back and forth. I saw what Napier put up, right? We went from 57th to 59th to 64th to worst to worst to worst. I went back and looked at Buster Faulkner's number there at Georgia Tech, and I saw what he was working with there. Last year ranking up to 12th. Right. Yeah. So phenomenal in total offensive production. So that's phenomenal. I'm trying to figure out what this roster looks like. And as I'm looking at the personnel, seeing what's coming in, the setting, the expectations, the burden on the shoulders, I would like to see a top 45 offense. So for me, I think 45 is going to be the number that I'm going to be happy with. Seeing the offensive production that's returning, seeing how Buster Faulkner works in offense. So for me, it's going to be top 45. Going over to or you want to go first on offense, or do you want to go to defense?
Go ahead. Do both. You're good.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. Now, on the defense side of the football, we know the struggles we've had. We've talked about what Florida looks like overall from a bend, don't break philosophy. We know that we had a lot of takeaways in previous years, and those takeaways might have masked certain other issues. Well, guess what, folks? Last year, we didn't have as many takeaways, and we had those issues, especially as it pertains to the yardage struggles, third down struggles, so on and so forth. So as I look at how that ranks, and then I look at Sumrall back at Tulane, right? So you look at Sumrall back at Tulane, they are ranked number 79 at 384 yards a game. I said, okay, we've got that. And if we were to crack the top 50, that means we're allowing under 351 yards a game. So I don't know how I feel about top 50 on the defensive side of football. I feel strongly more about the defensive than I do the offense. So that's why I'm going to put a top 50 defense. So top 45 offense, top 50 defense. That's my expectation in 2026. How about you, B?
Yeah, so very similar. I did base this off scoring instead of yardage. Okay. So because this is why we evaluated when we looked at where you needed to be in for the rankings, right, for the SEC teams and the playoff teams and all that stuff. We did look at scoring for that. So that's where I based it off when we did that pod last season. But that's fine, because the numbers are actually pretty much the same. And really, when you look at it, typically those kind of align anyway. I mean, maybe not exactly always, but they're especially if you have a bend don't break, actually. But regardless,
yep.
So, but the point is the same, which is fine. So my offensive and defensive ranking here I want them both inside the top 50. So that aligns with you, right? We want them both inside the top 50, but I want one inside the top 40. I don't care which. I don't care which. I want one of them inside the top 40. Both inside the top 50. That's what I'm asking for, right? So yeah, that's the breakdown. And for very much similar reasons to what you just said, right? Not setting the bar something that I think is too high for this first season, but I want to see better execution with the talent, right? Yes. That we have and the capabilities that are there. I'll talk more to that later when we get to closing this thing out. All right, last but not least, the most important stat of any of these, wins and losses. Most importantly, wins. So I did this a little differently than I think what we talked about. We just said an acceptable win total. So when I evaluate acceptable win total, what I'm saying is what's the floor that's okay for wins in 2026. So that's kind of how I looked at this. What is, and maybe you did it a little differently, and that's okay if you did. But I said, what's the floor that I'm okay with for his first year in Gainesville, assuming, well, just period. Honestly, there's no assuming anything. What's the floor for a win total? And that is taking into account the schedule. Because one thing we talked about these last couple of years is the schedule has been absolutely mind-numbing, right? It's been the toughest thing we've seen possibly ever for 2 years in a row in college football. It is not the toughest thing ever this next year. It's still a challenging schedule, but it's not ridiculous. It's not obscene. It's not this absurdity that we've had. So to that end, my answer for a win total for next year as a floor, not saying we can't do better, but saying that what I want to see as a minimum is 8 games. I want to see 8 wins. What do you got?
Interesting. Okay. I did not do it that way, but I can see why you did. I'm looking at the overall schedule, right? So for those of you who don't know, at Florida Atlantic, the Owls. Okay, first game. Second game against Campbell, the Fighting Camels. Give me a break. Third game at Auburn. Fourth game versus Ole Miss. Fifth game at Mizzou. Sixth game against South Carolina. And then at Texas. Of course, Florida, Georgia. Then versus Oklahoma. Then at Kentucky versus Vanderbilt. And finishing up the season at Florida State. B, I agree with you, not at quite the murderous row of a schedule that we had past. So for me, I'm looking at 6 home games, 6 away games. I'm looking at a 9-win season.
So that is, when you say 9 wins, that's what you think is acceptable, or you're just saying you're projecting 9 wins?
Hang on a second. From an acceptable standpoint, I would say 8. I would say 8. My projection is 9. And then that excludes, we have a winning record. We're not sure where we'll end up in the CFP. We go to a bowl win. That should be number 10. But again, that's postseason. So
just regular season. Yeah, regular season only for sure. That's all we're talking about here. All right.
Yep.
Good enough. Cool. So yeah, I think more or less we align there, and that's fine if you ended up doing it a little differently. All good. All right. Cool. So that's 26. Let's talk 27. I think for the first point, we don't have anything we can really get specific on, but remain a priority, right? We have to do well there again, as we already did once. We have to do well again. We can't be losing big names left and right. Obviously, you're going to have a guy or two that's going to slip on you. It's just the nature of the beast anymore. But you can't lose if you're Ohio State. You're not losing Jeremiah Smith, right? If you're Florida, you can't be losing Dallas Wilson, right? You just can't do it. You just can't do it, assuming he ends up being the production guy that we think he is. Now, listen, if he gets hurt all year again, and that's who he's going to be, 1 year is one thing, 2 years is another, right? So now that's a different conversation. But assuming he goes out and produces like we think he can, you can't lose that guy, right? You just can't do it. You can't do it. Right. So that's something where guys that are out there and making significant impact production cannot just be let go, right? That's what we're talking about. So Jaden Baugh being the primary example this year, couldn't lose that guy. Just couldn't do it. You had to find a way. We found a way. That's what I'm talking about. Those kind of keeps are ones you just have to have, right? And the best of the best programs out there do that year in and year out. You don't see the best of the best leaving from certain programs, right?
Right.
There were examples occasionally, but it's usually when a coach leaves, right? Like Caleb Downs left Alabama, but it's because Saban left, right? So that's an exception, right? So it's you just don't see it typically. So there I don't have any specific metrics for what I'm looking for other than that. Do you have anything specific for 27 for that? I wouldn't imagine, but just want to make sure to give you the opportunity.
No, I think at the end of the day, a lot of what we're focused on, and I could be wrong, I'm not going to speak for you, but I think that a lot of what we can focus on is the product on the field, the overall attitude, what the transfer portal looks like, what the overall class looks like. And at the end of the day, if it means that we have another 9-win season, okay, where does that put the rest of FBS in the top 134? What does the CFP picture look like, right? What does the field look like? And also, if we can stack on another win and get it to 9 or get it to 10, great. But I think there are 4 or 5 different facets that we are looking at to set us up for that future success. And that's why I believe we will definitely know by the end of the 2027 season what path we're going down, and if Summerall is setting the bar and has achieved the bar and is getting the job done.
Absolutely, yeah, and that would definitely factor into my closing thought there. But did you do the different positions and recruiting class ranks and offense and defensive ranking and win total and all that for 27 as well, or no?
No.
Okay, so I did. So I did make some changes on this. So I'll just share my thoughts with you on those as well. So just so you, because I did tweak them a little bit. So I brought my rankings down a little bit because again, it's not your bump class, right? So don't have quite as high an expectation for this year, but still up there. So I want either a combination of a top 10 recruiting class and a top 20 portal, or inside top 15 for both, right? So bringing those expectations down a little bit, but still keeping them pretty elevated, right? Because again, it's no longer the bump class. Now you've got the opportunity to still maintain a high standard, but it doesn't have to be super elite, right? Because it's not your second year bump where you really want to see it pop, right? So I brought them down a little bit. As far as offensive and defenses, this is where we really need to start to see it shine, right? This is where the execution's got to come through. It's got to be really good. So I have offensive and defensive ranking both in the top 45, and one of them I want to see top 30, right? Because
45 and 30, wow.
Yep, and this is where you make your playoff run, right? So my acceptable floor once again is now 9 wins, but realistically the goal should be 10 that season. Right? It should be a 10-win goal into the playoff, right? That's going to be the goal of the season. An acceptable floor is 9 because it doesn't always go your way, right? You can have one game that maybe doesn't get there. But remember, Florida, Georgia in 27 is being played in Tampa. So that is effectively a home game, right? Whereas next year it's in Athens. So it is effectively an away game. So remember, those two games get weird in the next 2 years because no games in Jacksonville. Thank goodness, no Everbank Field to give us 95,000 injuries. So, so ultimately, I'm setting that as a 9. And again, the goal would be 10, but a floor is 9 for me. So that kind of like you were talking about next season. So yeah, so to your point and kind of wrapping that up, I think it's exactly right. How do you continue to build momentum and then look to roll that into future success? So getting into that point and the third year and beyond. What are you looking for in those kind of first 2 years? I think you already talked about that a little bit, but discuss a little the third year and beyond based on those first 2 years of performance and what are we looking for? Like, what does that look like aside from, of course, trying to win a national title, but beyond that, what's a little more detail there?
Yeah, so I think the other thing that we look at is the progression, right? How are we progressing? Napier said this, Napier said that, but at the end of the day, we really did not progress all that, right? Recruiting classes stayed about the same, offense slipped, defense slipped, right? Some years. So the main thing that I'm looking at with Sumrall is going to be the offensive production, especially if Buster Faulkner is still here at the OC. And Summerall is controlling the majority of the defense with White. Do we creep into the top 30? Do we creep into the top 25?
Yep.
When it comes to overall productivity, right? So that's going to be key. What do the optics look like? What does the program look like? What do the extracurriculars look like? Because one of the things that we've always held this program high on is culture, doing the right thing, having the right mindset. Of course, we've got a lot of SEC scholar athletes, so you've got that component in there as well. So my thing is, do we crack that top 30? Do we crack the top 25, top 20? And now consistently, do we start a run? Do we create that momentum to have the run that we had from 05 to 11? Can we do it? But also, is it sustainable? Do we have the pieces coming in when it comes from the recruiting classes? Because if you're at that point, your recruiting class now, you're top 5. You are top 5 recruiting class. You're top 5 in the portal. You're doing the things you need to do to attract the talent that needs to come here and continue what you started. So that's the main thing that's going to tell the tale of the tape for this program over the next 8 to 10 years, undoubtedly.
Yep, absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head in a lot of different ways. You kind of start building that machine, right?
Yes.
That we've seen with a lot of other, well, not a lot, but a few other programs that have been capable of starting to do that. I do think it's reasonable to put out there though that it's very difficult to really become a truly elite program, right? There really are only a couple that ever really consistently dominate year in, year out, have a reasonable expectation of seeing certainly the playoffs and then really a deep run in the playoffs every year, right? And it's only getting harder to do that, right? It's not getting easier, it's getting harder. And there are really only like a handful of teams, like less than 5, that are really in that conversation. You can debate who they are. I'm not going to get into it, but we're not one of them. Let's be clear. And I don't mean recently, I mean ever, to be clear. And that's okay. That's okay, right? It doesn't mean we can't be there semi-consistently. Certainly more than we have been. This is not me bad-mouthing Florida football, right? We're still the only school that has 3 national championships in football and 3 national championships in basketball. We care about other sports here too. We have to keep that in mind. As much as you and I love football, we also don't mind basketball. Hey, how about them Gator boys, by the way? They're starting to heat it up. But
yes, sir.
Regardless, the point of what I'm trying to say is this university has always, at least since Foley's time, made investments in other places. And that shows through, especially when you start dealing with NIL the way we are now, right? We're not going to put every dime into football. We're not going to do it. Just get over it if you want that to happen. It's not happening. So there are going to be schools that are going to invest more and ultimately are going to pull more year in and year out from a, overall talent perspective because of the money that's now in this, unless there's significantly more regulation that gets put in, and that still isn't happening. So that's an important point to keep in mind as we go through this thing. But that's not to say that if you can't get a good coach in here, see Curt Cignetti as an example, that you can't still do something and make runs and win. Now, is Indiana going to go back and win the national title again next year? Highly doubt it. They could. I can't rule it out. He's a really good coach, but I don't think so, right? Because you're losing so much talent, and it's going to be so hard to replace all of that, right? Yeah. But then again, his talent ceiling wasn't that high to begin with, so I don't know, man. That guy's pretty amazing. So we'll have to see what happens. But I think that had something to do with how long those guys have been playing for him than what their talent level was, if we really look at it. But having said all that, move along, talk more about Florida again here. What I want to see, both in first couple of years and beyond, is high quality execution and scheme right from the jump, right? Something that we have not seen in many ways in the last 4 years, right? And I also want to see that not only be good from the start, but improve moving forward, right? Figure out what's working, what's not, and adapt and change as needed, right? Fix things. Yeah, no, blasphemy, right? Once again, twice on the same pod. Adapt when things aren't working and embrace things that do work, right? That is super, super important, right? Super important. So again, things we have not seen. But what else is important? Talent acquisition, you mentioned it, super important, but doesn't mean anything, as we saw this year, if you can't show the results on Saturday, if you can't put it into a plan and into a purpose that works when it gets out on the field. This team proved that in spades this year. The amount of talent on this team to go 4-8 it's almost mind-boggling, to be honest, right? It doesn't even make sense, right? So what are we looking for? Those pretty much sum it up. And what I really want to say is what we have going into 26 is a really unique opportunity. And that is we get another talented roster similar to what we just had last season. It's not the same. Certainly things are different, but we have a very talented roster once again, except we get a different chance this year. Because last year we knew the constraints that Billy was going to put on this offense, right? We had concerns from the jump. We were like, okay, we think Lagway is going to help him overcome his deficiencies, right? We were wrong, right? Yeah, we were wrong, but that's okay. The point is this year we don't have to worry about that, right? We may have other things to worry about. We don't have to worry about that, right? And obviously we will dig into this more during the offseason and discuss this in more depth, but we very well may have a very rare opportunity to get a mulligan, right? From a wasted year where we could have done so much more. But the really cool thing is it will give us a genuine opportunity very early on in Sumrall's tenure here to see what he and the staff are capable of, because we are not in a situation like we were when Billy started. Regardless of Billy's other issues, he was genuinely in a situation where he started where we had to wait for a build and trust the process and see what happens as he gets time to put this thing together. This thing is fairly well put together right now, right? The cupboard is not bare, as we like to say when Billy took over. We're not in that situation. Not at all. Far from it. This roster is very decently talented. We'll definitely take a look when the composite rankings come out. But if we're below top 15 when those rankings come out, I'll be stone cold shocked. I really will be. I can project that we will almost certainly be in the top 15 again. And that really puts us in a very unique position to have a great opportunity to make a run here in this year, not necessarily a playoff run, but certainly have a run at a very potentially successful first season and really see what these guys can do with some good talent. And that's awesome to have the opportunity to evaluate right in year one, right?
Yes.
Jon talked about it in his opening press conference. He wants to win now, right? And we have a real opportunity to do that. And that is not me pumping sunshine. That is not orange and blue goggles. The talent is still there on this team. They just have to leverage it properly and do things that make sense. And that is all I have got in terms of what we want to see moving forward. But I think if we see those type of things, especially year one, year two,
yeah,
I think we got a real good chance to see a year three that is successful and beyond. So, but we don't know if we're going to see that. That's just what we're looking for. We set the bar. That was the point of this. We've got some metrics we can look at and come back to and refer to, and we will. Because if we don't see it, we're not making excuses. This is not, no more free passes, no more, oh, he gets time, right? We really did give Billy a lot of that because we really did think he came into a bad situation. I think a lot of people did. That's not what's happening with Jon.
No.
If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out, and we're moving on. That's how we're going to approach this. So I think a lot of people feel the same way, and I don't blame them. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you. Any other closing thoughts before we wrap this thing up and give info on the next pod here?
Yeah, that's it. No, very interesting. B and I wanted to do this pod because we wanted to kind of hash out what some of the positives were, and that's why we titled it, the bar for Sumrall, is trying to figure out what we want to look for. What are we expecting? What are we wanting to see, in his first couple of years. And I think it was really good to hash this out because we can, as you said, we can look at it from orange and blue goggles and be completely unrealistic, or we can go back to the numbers and figure out from a productivity standpoint, on offense, on defense, the efficiency levels, exactly where we need to be. And I think we did a good job of that. So having that been said, next regularly scheduled podcast shouldn't take as long to produce, but Thursday, February 5th. And the reason why it's Thursday, February 5th, towards the end of the week, is because National Signing Day is February 4th. So join us that Thursday evening, February 5th, for our National Signing Day pod, which will be episode number 81. And so look forward to doing that. So outside of that, anything else, B, before I wrap us up?
Yeah, just a brief summary on that. Obviously, not likely to sign possibly anyone, right? National Signing Day is not what it used to be. So the point of that, I just wanted to give a summary there. Again, as I mentioned before, we'll break down all the transfers that we didn't already break down, right, that have come in since, and then just kind of give a high level look at the combined class, right, of recruits we already did sign on early signing day, and then all the transfer we've got in, kind of address, what's still missing, if anything, right, that we need to kind of look for. But moreover, like what does the full class look like? Where do we see, the potential for success and maybe, some weak spots as well, and just kind of look at that total class overall. That's really going to be the purpose of that. Of course, if we do sign anybody, the reason we're waiting until the day after is in case there is somebody else that comes in that we can evaluate them as well. So
yes,
ultimately that's the purpose of that. I just want to give a little more detail on what we're looking to do there. But yeah, other than that, no, I think we're good. Thanks for taking the time today that we finally got to it, and hopefully we will not have further delays moving forward this year. But yeah, that's all I got. You can take us home and sign us off, man.
Awesome, B. With that being said, wherever you are and whenever you may be listening, thank you for taking the time, and we will see you around, Gator Nation.